All right. Welcome back. Hey everyone, it's your host TemaraToday, and you're listening to the Black Jezebel podcast. I hope everyone is doing well on this Tuesday. I know that a couple weeks ago we talked a little bit about um, BDSM with Jet Set and Jasmine, but today I wanted to go a little bit more into depth with it and talk about it with a person that I met at Sex Down South. I know y'all know I rant and rave about it pretty much every episode. So I hope everyone has registered for the conference for this year, this September, as the Black Jezebel will be presenting a workshop. So I hope everyone is excited with registration and making sure you get your tickets and all of that. Let me know if you have any questions. Send me an email. But today we're going to be talking to a guest that I've been trying to get on for a very long time. So I'm really excited. We're going to be talking today about everything BDSM in the Black community, what that looks like, how that shows up, and really how it can be integrated into our mental health and sexual health and expressing ourselves in that way. So I like for our guests to be able to introduce themselves, but as a little bit of a background, our guest goes by the name of BlakSyn, and we initially met at Sex Down South last year in the BDSM dungeon. So I'm not gonna, well, for those of you all who heard the episode on Sex Down South, you already know a little bit of my experience in the dungeon, but I'm going to share a little bit more of that experience in my Black Jezebel moment. So you'll have to wait until the end of the episode to hear that. But welcome, BlakSyn. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking.
So glad that you are able to join us today. First, I want to jump right into the name BlakSyn. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and what that name means and represents?
Hello, I am BlakSyn, most commonly known as Black Educator. I am a 32-year-old professional cop, BDSM educator, content creator, photographer, published writer, uh, and meme maker and lover of rubber ducks. I identify as non-binary. My pronouns are they. BlakSyn is spelled BLAKSYN. The entirety of the name is an acronym meaning be like a king, so you never. And the slogan
Mm.
ended on purpose so that I can continuously check myself and check my own power. Black refers to my heritage. Black refers to the opposite of white, or something that is seen as less desirable. Black is the color of my skin. Black also refers to the left hand path. If anybody is familiar with the occult, sin refers to religious sin. Sin stands for sin. Also refers to synergy amongst those
Mm-hmm.
asunder. And yeah, that's what my name means. And
All right, come on through with the roll call because that was helpful. I mean, I really appreciate the intention behind each aspect of that, and I think that gives, at least for me, gives a better insight into um, how you approach your work and the thoughtfulness behind each of those details. So that actually is really helpful and informational for us to hear. So, can you give us a little bit of understanding? First, I would like to go into a little bit of the terminology behind BDSM, each what each one of the letters mean, represent, and then we'll get a little bit more into how you got into BDSM.
BDSM is comprised of course, four letters, and we in the community group the letters two and two and two. That means the B and the D and the S and the M.
Mm.
For the B and the D, you have bondage and discipline. For the D and S, you have dominance and submission. And for the S and the M, you have sadomasochism, or
Hmm.
sadism and masochism.
Okay. And can you explain to us a little bit more? Because I feel like a lot of people really usually only hear about like the bondage aspect of it, or really only hear about the submissive aspect of it. But I don't know if people really get an understanding of the M and like what that represents, what that looks like.
Well, so we have our B bondage to hold something or someone in captivity, and in BDSM we do that consensually. We have our D for discipline, which means a best way to describe discipline is just behaving within a certain set of parameters, just behaving within the confines of those parameters. Dominance is exerting control over another entity. Submission refers to allowing yourself to be swayed or moved or otherwise be controlled by that dominance. Sadism refers to the practice of inflicting pain.
Mm-hmm.
Person doing so would be a sadist, and a masochist is a person who likes to receive pain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So now that we have a layout of what all of the letters represent when we talk about the BDSM community, can you give us an idea, a little bit of background of how you yourself, as a Black individual from Illinois, outside of Chicago, how did you land into like what was that trajectory for you to get into this community?
Uh, well, just getting into the community because of education. Um, I discovered BDSM around the age of 16 because of pornography. And there I was, just on the webs and, being a little horny 16-year-old, came across some BDSM, and, I thought to myself, wow, this really speaks to me in a way that it can only speak to a 16-year-old, and that it was very interesting. But I liked how it made me feel when I viewed these scenes, or the when I took in this content.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent some time just kind of just getting familiar with BDSM, like, what people are doing, why people do it, what is going on. This is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. As far as
Mm-hmm.
I knew at that point, the only kind of sex was, just, or anything that was doing having to do with sexuality required, intercourse of some sort. And so I just studied, and, I held in my heart that this is something that I want to do. This is something I want to practice. Where do I find someone? And 3 years later is when I would practice BDSM for the first time at 19 years old.
Mm.
And at this point, I have practiced BDSM for 13 years.
Wow. Okay. So practice BDSM. And how did you move into becoming a BDSM sex educator, or as you call it, a kinky black educator? Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm
Kinky
wrong.
Black Educator. No, no, that's me. I so a few years ago in 2017, I had finally gotten tired of Chicago. I was staying in Chicago, and the winters were really harsh, and I had become um, more informed about the importance of mental health.
Mm.
And the winters in Chicago, as you know, it's commonly known, are quite harsh. Sometimes I remember one year it got down to like 50 below zero with the wind
Shit is
chill,
ridiculous.
and
It's just
it
ridiculous.
is very
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I went to undergrad in Minnesota, and being from New Orleans, I had never even seen snow before. So seeing a negative
Yeah.
30 something, I was like, what the fuck is this happening outside? So yes, definitely has an impact on our mental health.
For sure. I just reasoned that, it is time for a change of scenery. I need
Hmm.
someplace to go. I need to get out of here. And one of my partners of 5 years now just randomly threw out Philly. They were like, Philly. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to Philly. So I got up and I went to Philly. And when I arrived in Philly, I was still practicing BDSM. I wasn't practicing, I wasn't in a relationship at the time. I didn't have a regular playmate or anything like that. I moved to Philly, and I needed a place to work. I needed a place to work. So there's a tourist area in Philadelphia called South Street. And so I just started just pounding the pavement. I had a manila folder full of resumes and I was just dropping them off. I was dropping them off, dropping them off. And I arrived at this particular sex shop. And I walk into the sex shop and I get ready to drop off a resume and they give me an application. I like fill out this application. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do it. And they were like, no, it's long. And, ask some like very specific questions and whatnot. And I was like, okay. So I took this application and filled it out. Uh, One of the most interesting applications I've ever seen.
How so?
I remember one of the I remember one of the questions was oh, if you were going to if a gentleman came into our store and you were going to help him cross dress, uh, then what items would you suggest for this person? Like questions like that, like very specific, industry specific, like questions that require you to have some knowledge. But because of my like of BDSM and other subjects that are adjacent to the subject of BDSM, um, I aced the test and the application, and I got hired. And then while I was there, I just like to talk. I think about a lot of stuff. I try to think about things in a way that scratches below the surface. So what happened is when customers came in, I was always having like these really long conversations with customers. Like, hey, you should try this. These are the reasons why you should try it. This is why I think it'll be good for you. This is, tips and tricks and just, what I'm saying, people like really feeling like I just really like care, like as an employee. Like I want you to come back, but I also want you to have a good time, as well. If somebody came into my store and like they can get what they want, for cheaper, then I would be like, hey, like look at this thing. I was really trying to look out for people.
And as a
So my
consumer,
boss,
I'll just say we appreciate that because you can tell the
oh for
difference when
sure,
you go into, especially a place like a sex shop or a sex store, and it's so intimate and it's so it requires a level of vulnerability. You definitely can tell from a consumer perspective when someone is really invested in someone's pleasure versus just trying to make a sale. So
exactly. And that was my thing. I know what that feels like when folks are like on my ass and they're trying to make a sale and they're just not giving me personal space or giving me room to, consider my own options or even some sex shops that I've been in where they don't give you that opportunity to, see what works for yourself. Like I know my body, let me look around. But anyway, my boss noticed this. My boss was like, wow, you talk a lot to the customers and stuff and they come back and they ask for you and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah. And this was the kind of sex shop that teaches classes. On the third floor of the shop was where we taught classes, various classes, from everything from basic rope stuff to advanced rope stuff to learning how to deep throat and just like like we had like these classes. And my boss was like, you should teach a class. And I was like, nah. I was like, nah. The first time she came, I was like, nah.
I don't
And
want to do
then
it.
she came to me again. I was like, nah. And she came to me again. I was like, nah. And then she came to me again. I was like, look. This is my issue. Okay. There's a lot of disproportionate shit happening in terms of how sexuality is, sexuality knowledge, meaning that marginalized communities have knowledge that is disproportionate to white folks. So I told my boss, I was like, look, okay, I was like, because my boss, while a kind person, also has a business to run, and I think that her trying to give me the teach was a combination of this can be good for business, but also like you're good at this.
Right.
Um, so I was like, all right, look, I'll teach a class, but you gotta let me teach like QC POC only class, POC only classes. Like you gotta let me do that. She was like, cool. So the first two classes I taught sold out, um, and which was crazy because like all of the classes I had seen up to that point for like the past like year and a half at that point were like predominantly white, and to see that I could fill a classroom with melanated individuals, black folks, and Latinx folks, and just a classroom full of POC POC, that was really profound. That had a really profound like effect on me, and I realized that there is a void that needs to be filled, and because of just what I represent, um, my marginalized status in several different areas of my life, the way that I look, and so on and so forth. Like this my experience just wasn't out there in relation to this subject. So I started teaching around Philly. Started holding events around Philly. QTPOC only play parties, POC only play parties. I started I started writing more. But the thing was, is that on Instagram, I was like, all right, I'm getting popular at work. Let me be kind of like a public figure, kind of, in a sense of speaking.
Yeah.
Because folks were coming in, they were asking for me. If I wasn't there, they would leave. I'm getting called at home sometimes and shit like that. So I was like, let me make this public figure page, so people can like reach me easily and just see some of my cohorts and some of the tips and stuff that I have. And I was doing the different events here in Philly, which I don't anymore because my labor, I was doing a lot of labor,
Yeah.
and what I was receiving for that labor was disproportionate. I did a lot of free labor. Not that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, at some point you got to know your worth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I was on Instagram and I was writing, I was chilling, and it snowballed into this thing that it's still, I have no idea how this all happened.
What were you writing?
I started out, I had like, I don't know, 700 people on my IG, and that number is very different now. And I'm grateful. So I'm very grateful, very happy that I can be able to talk about these issues and talk about some of the depth that BDSM has to offer. That's a little bit of my story from looking for a job to sex educator.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that you pointed out. One, do you remember what were the first two classes that you did teach and offer in Philly?
Oh, they were BDSM 101s.
Okay.
They were definitely BDSM 101s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, but they were exclusive to the people of color community, so that they could come in and have. And I think you mentioned that a little bit when you talk about how it's a disproportion about how we learn about BDSM and how people are able to show up. And I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit more about that, because it is very common that people do not equate BDSM with people of color communities, because that's not usually what we see. Even what you're saying, your first introduction was through pornography, seeing BDSM on a screen. It's very rare for me to see people of color in those spaces, and let alone actually being involved in a community and leading and educating a community. So can you talk a little bit about one, why do you think that it has been such a, because it's not that Black people or people of color in general are not engaging in these different, sexual expressions, are not engaging in these different play activities, but the conversations about it are very different. And the way in which they sometimes are repressed or concealed or not communicated freely about is very, very different than our white counterparts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So BDSM has a long history in America. It also has a long history with Black folks as well. Black folks been in BDSM for a long time. I would say since the '60s. Since the '60s, since the late '50s, '60s, when because some of the cultures adapted from gay culture and uniform culture intersecting with gay culture, which actually ended up expanding to lots and lots of different practices from lots and lots of different types of people. And Black folks are some of those folks. The thing is that when you you don't see your experience reflected in the content that you're consuming,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna feel like it's not for you, right? We've all
Absolutely.
heard the phrase that, "Hey, that's some white folk shit,"
Okay.
when in actuality, you have just as much as right and just as much
Mm-hmm.
history with this as they do,
Right.
you know. And I think that is one of the most prevalent problems with black folks and people of color not feeling like that. It's not necessarily an aversion. It's an aversion due to the fact that because um because of white supremacy, that a gate has been erected as a result of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if predominantly you see these kinds of people in this particular subject,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to, understandably, you're going to understandably draw the conclusion that this is not for me. I don't see black people doing this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
only seeing white people do this. So therefore, this is not for me.
Right.
When you couldn't be more wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I also think that it's important to also say that there is a depth to BDSM. There are modes where we can use BDSM in a therapeutic sense. We can change the narrative of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We can use this for healing. And I think a lot of that gets missed, especially in regards to mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
You got 50 Shades of Grey, and folks are thinking like, oh yeah, that's BDSM. That's exactly what it
Right.
is. And I'm like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And you know, I think that black people, just in general, have a history of conservatism within our culture, especially in regards to religious indoctrination, and just like what we've just been like exposed to, just in
Mm-hmm.
general. Um, and I think that takes some time, like getting over. Like we're just now seeing like black people take ownership of their bodies,
Listen,
where
you getting into my shit now because everyone knows that I love talking about respectability politics. Like, it's literally one of my like favorite things to talk about. But I think, and you touched on it so beautifully about what we are exposed to and living under the gaze of white supremacy and like how literally that shows up because it really is so much about power and who has access to pleasure. And so when we think about the strategies behind um, kind of monopolizing pleasure in a way that would be beneficial for certain people, it's like, okay, well, let's create this porn industry that heightens that, certain type of people, a certain type of person deserves to have pleasure and it deserves to look this way and it deserves to be celebrated and highlighted, and other people need to look at this as the role model of what pleasure looks like. Well, what we know is that is usually a white person of, of whatever gender, because it's the entire spectrum. But usually it is void of people of color, because what we know of the roots from slavery is that it has always been a very, very delicate issue when we talk about sex and sexual expression and sexuality in the Black community, because there is such a huge dynamic of power there. And part of the respectability politics and part of the devotion to the religious, practices that we, were embedded so deeply into our culture was about power, about controlling that, about saying, okay, now we, if you're going to be if you're going to be a sexual being, it needs to only be through our benefit. It needs to only be through, whether or not, you doing something that is going to benefit me as the majority versus you doing something that is innately your right. Pleasure is something that, is innately a human right. And that's something that we've never been, we're, like you said, we're just recently getting to the point where we're having those type of conversations and trying to reclaim pleasure as a radical act. And I think that BDSM is one of those things that's almost like, if you want to talk about, levels of Jumanji, BDSM is like we still on level 1, and that's like level 5. And so it creates an almost extra layers of saying, okay, now I believe that I can receive pleasure. Okay, great. Then that means I can, be more autonomous in how I negotiate sex. Okay, great. That means that maybe I can, communicate with my partner about doing things that I would like a little bit differently. Okay, great. Now that means, I can dress in lingerie and maybe celebrate my body in different ways. But the level it takes for people to get to, I still feel like there's a blockage of people crossing over to that level 5 Jumanji of like, hey, there's still this whole nother area of power. And the power dynamics of BDSM, it seems so rooted in that consensual exchange of power that I think cognitively we have a difficulty understanding what it looks like to consensually give our power away. Can you talk a little bit more about how one consent works in BDSM, and how that looks differently for us when we talk about that power exchange? Because I do feel like it's something that's very, like, it is very seldom that we see that in our lives as Black individuals.
Well, let me say this. I think that um, I think that we've sort of been on a path as a people, and our path has led to new discoveries and new ways to celebrate ourselves. And we didn't receive this from our parents, and they didn't receive that from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is because we enjoy a certain kind of privilege like nowadays. And what I mean is that our mothers and our fathers and our grandfathers and our grandmothers, they didn't have time
Yep.
to think about sexuality. They
Yep.
didn't have time to reclaim their bodies. They didn't have time to change their own narratives. They were worried about prejudice.
Yep.
They were worried about racism. They were worried about socioeconomic disparities. They were worried about a host of other ugly things that just would not have given them the time
Absolutely.
to exercise the privileges that we do like nowadays. So I think it's definitely important that we give thanks, we say thank you, we give praise
Mm-hmm.
for that. Now, the thing is that when prejudice rears its head, when racism rears its head, when those things rear their head, these are things that we do not consent to. All
Mm-hmm.
right, we don't consent to those things. Right. So as you exist as a POC, as you exist as a Black person, you have to constantly, perpetually deal with these things that you don't consent to. The angry Black man, or the
Mm-hmm.
angry, Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
or what I'm saying, the ugly shit that they say about us, the stereotypical shit that they say about us. Like, you have to constantly deal with this shit, and you do
Yep.
not consent to any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a remnant of power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Because with power dynamics, meaning, if we break it down, dynamics refer to change, and power is the ability to control forces within a system,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these are forces. So these are forces that control that. These are forces that control, like, change. These are forces that control power. These
Yep.
are forces that change and alter, and augment power in some way, right? And the power dynamic here for our existence and the existence of those who came before us was that white folks enjoyed the power,
Mm-hmm.
and we were forced to be under that power, through all kinds of systems, through systematic oppression and a host of other systems that were placed
Right.
specifically with POC in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as a result of that, like, because we don't have a good understanding of, like, power dynamics or what it's even like to have power within a system, our sense of power dynamics in relation to our own existences gets skewed,
Oof.
right?
Baby, look,
So,
because I'm getting excited. These are the type of conversations that get me worked up. Come on, preach.
so I think that I think that Black folks, I think POC can benefit from BDSM in a sense where that this is an opportunity to change your narrative. This is the
Mhm.
opportunity to consent to something or
Mhm.
not consent to something and have that consent be respected. This is
Mhm.
an opportunity for you to change your story. This is a chance for you to spit in the face of white supremacy. This is a chance for you to
Mhm.
celebrate your mother. This is a chance for you to celebrate your grandmother. This is a chance for you to celebrate all of these things that the use of consensual consensual acts that happen between individuals as they dibble and dabble within the realm of BDSM. But you have to be open to that. You have to know that this is available to you. And if
Mhm.
all of your life, you've been on the negative side of power dynamics, you've been on the non-consensual side of the power dynamics, you're not going to be able to see that or gather that
Mhm.
for yourself.
Right. Whew. Child. I mean, it's just it's revolutionary. It really is
Yes.
it's truly revolutionary. And I think that you said so many gems, but especially like it is a privilege that we have to be in a space right now where we are reclaiming pleasure and we're reclaiming our bodies in a way that our ancestors and those before us just could not. They just didn't have the access to. They did not have the ability to do that when you're navigating all of the other systems of oppressions. That not to say that those are completely gone now, but we are continuously evolving as a people. And I feel that this is the time where we're challenging those systems in a more aggressive way, in ways that where we're reclaiming those spaces. And that looks very different, even when we talk about gender and sexuality, but even potentially how we present to other people. That also has an influence on our ability, our inability to negotiate that power and if that is consensual or not. So, for example, as a femme presenting person, individual, myself, I think that ways in which, because there's this perception that I am quote unquote a strong Black woman, if I present in an aggressive way, then it it's almost expected, right? It's almost,
Mm-hmm.
is welcomed because that is the narrative or the script that has been written for me. However, in that same presentation, if I then present as a submissive, then it's like, what's wrong with you, girl? Get up off the floor. What are you doing? You have power. Why are you allowing someone to treat you in this way? And so I think that is really interesting when we talk about the dynamics of BDSM and how that integrates with our culture as people of color, because there are these instilled roles that we still have to navigate. And I'm wondering what your experience as a Black masculine presenting person how has that come up when you have navigated, especially when we talk about dominatrix and being a professional dom, and having that, I guess, having to navigate those societal scripts that are already placed on how we present as individuals, and then being in a completely different environment where power looks different.
My presentation happens on a few fronts. You have the Black masculine presenting person. You have the person who identifies as a top. You have the person who enjoys a type of privilege as a result of the person who is conventionally or reasonably attractive. Um, and these all play into sexuality and BDSM in
Absolutely.
some way. So I think that I think that first and foremostly, it's important for me to acknowledge that as a masculine presenting person, it's a person who, for all intents and purposes, looks like a man. That I enjoy a kind of privilege
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that. You know, I'm sorry, I got a notification. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Um, so me presenting in this way is a type of privilege, but at the same time, because of the way that I present, I'm expected to behave within the confines of people's expectations, right? I'm
Mm.
supposed to, be all loud, all manly. I'm just supposed to be, what I'm saying, just snatching, women up and, doing
Mm.
whatever with them and stuff and whatnot. And, people, and that like kind of goes hand in hand with the position of a dominant or a top. That when people meet me, or from what they know about masculine presenting people, or masculine presenting people who
Mm-hmm.
identify as tops or dominants, that they just expect me to be all, I don't know, like just like all sexy and all like mysterious and
Mm-hmm.
like ready to just snatch somebody up at like any given time, when in actuality that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like at all. And anybody who's met me in person will tell you that. Will say, or played with me will tell you that. Um, and I think that there's an inherent problem here, right? Because it's like, oh, it's the big, strong, strapping black person. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Um, and the problem with that is that automatically goes back to the chopping block and slavery. Like
Yep.
that goes right back to there. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I don't appreciate that. So it's like it becomes important for me to like try to like undo that, but at the same time, I need to think about my own energy and protect my own energy.
Mm-hmm.
But on another way, in a completely different on the other side, it's like we spent so much time trying to avoid those stereotypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh shit, all right, these white folks just piss me off in here, but if I go off, they're gonna label me as an angry black
Yep.
person. If I lose my shit, they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna let me, let me, let me chill. All right, but let me rephrase that for you. Let me behave within the confines of what these people expect me to behave. All
Listen.
right, because they've allowed you, yeah, you've allowed yourself to like let them and those stereotypes like exert control over you. So
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to seem like the angry black person, because you don't want to seem like that kind of person,
Yep.
you are willing to make yourself small. You are willing to, uh, not speak up. You
Yep.
are willing to even up and to let your consent be violated.
Yep.
You know, uh, there's somebody somewhere, some black woman who has gotten a awesome, amazing, hairdo, and she's got a micro braids or a kinky twist, and some white person just goes over and just like, oh, this is so nice. Let me just touch your hair without your consent, and you could snap. You could look. You would be well within your right to
Well
completely
within.
lose your shit at that point, but you don't. You don't, and you just allow this shit to happen. And that's the kind of shit is that as a result of white supremacy, as a result of racism, as a result of that prejudice, as a result of those systems, it's like we got to appear docile now.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't, and when we don't exhale, blah, blah, blah. And when we don't behave as expected, it's also a problem,
Yep.
right? Like, you a strong black woman, right? You a
Mm-hmm.
strong girl, get up. Get up. You ain't allowed to be weak right now, but at the same time, don't you say nothing to those white folks.
Right.
You better not say anything to those white. And that's the shit that needs to stop.
Yep.
That's the shit that needs to stop. When somebody meets me, I'm not your fucking BBC. I'm not your nigga. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not your boy. I'm not any of those things. You will respect me for the human being that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not ask for it. I will demand it. Either you will meet me where I am, or you can get the fuck out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as simple as that. It's I'm not here for respectability. I'm not here to appease. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Okay.
not here to appease you. You know, my identities are unique to me and my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you dare for 1 second group me in with your stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
your predetermined ideas about how I'm supposed to behave. No.
Listen, because I'm about to just run around the room, holler and scream because, I mean, just yes. And so, in all of that, because that is the whole premise. That's why I do the work that I do. Because I feel very passionate about the need to resist that, the need to resist the um, I mean, it's just a traditional way. Like it's almost like we're in a trance of repression. Like we're so accustomed to repressing our true identities for so long that it's very confusing of who am I? How do I present? What do I do? How do I react? And I think that I know that that has such a effect, a profound effect on our abilities to recognize our true emotions, to be able to express what we want and what we need and what we desire from other people, from ourselves. How does that communicate? It is hugely tied to our mental health. It is hugely tied to our abilities, our inabilities to interact with other people and in our relationships. It's hugely tied to our success and how we navigate the world when we think about all aspects of our lives, professional, personal, spiritual, career. It's so important. And so I'm so glad you touched on that. And and it makes me think, and it ties it back to almost how we can use BDSM as a vehicle of not only like reclaiming that space, reclaiming that power, but also as an unconventional, untraditional way of addressing those repressions, of addressing some of that trauma, of addressing some of the psychological manipulation that we have been under for so long because of that almost like in trance state. I was one of the articles that I was reading and preparing for the show talks about this quote unquote subspace. Um, which I don't really. You can elaborate a little bit more on how it is described or what it looks like, but I gathered that it's this like once you reach a level of pleasure, it is kind of like this floating feeling of subconsciousness, and in that area, there's so many different things that can happen, so many different things that can come up because it's a place that we don't seldomly access. Um, and that spoke to me as far as like as a mental health professional because it's so common to tap into those psychological aspects when we talk about therapy, and even looking at BDSM as a form of therapy. When I thought about it from like even just like the body chemistry of how pain and pleasure play off of each other and what that looks like, what's happening in our body, and even you know how it overtakes our prefrontal cortex, which we know is it is our center of decision making. It's our center of how we define ourselves. And so being in that subspace, quote unquote, can create some type of lapse of time, lapse of intersections of pain and pleasure. And I feel like there's so much that can happen during that time, and there's so much that can be really therapeutic, but also sometimes can be really detrimental. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how it might, or how BDSM therapy can be used or be beneficial for people of color, specifically Black people that we know hold trauma in our bodies since slavery. Like we know it is stored in our actual physical beings.
Our DNA. It's stored in our DNA, our very DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I will preface by saying that subspace is a unique experience that will vary person to person. Subspace feels differently um, person to person. There's also a such thing as top space or dom space as well that doesn't get discussed very often. But um, rather than immediately like look at what's happening on the outside, let's talk about what's happening on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
In subspace is a result of the manipulation of the body's chemicals and hormones, namely chemicals like oxytocin, endorphins, adrenaline, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we are usually at I guess, a resting point for our the chemicals and hormones in our bodies. They are at a certain level usually at all times, and as a result of play, they will heighten that point at which where you're at and you're chilling and those chemicals at the normal point. That's your homeostasis. When you venture outside of homeostasis, uh, some of the benefits might mean that you might end up like kind of letting go, or you might reach that dreamlike, floaty headspace, fuzzy feeling with your body that people talk about. You might become intensely focused. You might have a cathartic experience as well, an emotional experience as well. And I think this is important for Black folks to understand in regards to BDSM because we are basically on guard like all the time.
All the time.
Just all the time.
All the
It's
time.
just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm walking down the street, oh, these white folks, they're gonna say some shit to me. Oh God, I'm being asked questions by the police. Am I gonna get shot today? I'm walking into this store. Am I gonna have to go off on one of these damn white folks and some shit? I just drew out a whole bunch of money. If I get pulled over by the cops right now, they can like search my shit because I have a large sum of money, hard-earned money on me. I'm driving like down the street, but there's a cop behind me. Am I gonna get pulled over today? It's just like all of this shit. Like we're constantly just on guard. You know what I'm saying? It's if you're listening to this right now, I want you to unclench your jaw.
Drop your shoulders.
I want you to uncock your shoulders. I want you to let your shoulders relax. Okay? You see what I mean?
Yep.
You're constantly on guard. Constantly. All right? So something like subspace with the right individual in the right settings will allow a person to let go. Trust is very important for this. It's very trust. Development of the relationship that you have with this individual is also very important. Your familiarity with some ins and outs of BDSM is very important for this to happen. But it's very possible. But the benefit is that you get to let go for even a moment. You get to release. You get to surrender if you so choose to do so. And surrender is not just for submissive. Surrender is also for tops. To let yourself go, to let yourself feel safe, to allow yourself to feel that someone has your best interest at heart. For even a moment, it's profound for people of color.
Yes, it is.
So I value subspace. I value top space. Not everyone will reach subspace or top space, and sometimes it'll be like very different for a lot of like individuals. But at the key thing to remember here is that it's not necessarily about subspace, top space, or down space, or bottom space. What's important to remember is the opportunity to let go, an opportunity to feel safe, an opportunity to feel cherished, an opportunity to feel like someone cares about you, an opportunity for you to release all that shit that you are always holding on to at all times as you move through life. That's what this offers you.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, and I think that is something. It wasn't until I experienced BDSM that I understood or could have a better understanding of why before care and after care were so important and so essential to the experience, and even being able to allow yourself the permission to let go and providing the consent to the care provider to being able to take you there. Can you talk a little bit more about what before care entails and after care entails, and like the importance of like consent in that conversation, or even just the conversation in itself?
So before care, with before care or pre care, as I refer to it as, is just getting your mind right. Thinking about the thing that you're going to do, manifesting a good time, bringing forth intentionality about the scene or what you intend to do with this individual. That means hydrating before. That means eating a meal before. That means telling somebody that you intend to go to somebody's house and play with them, and this is the address, and this is where I'm gonna be at. these are just a series of not necessarily precautions, but ways to lead in intentionality about the thing that you are doing as you manifest a time that is beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
As we play, we have our scene. Um, a scene being, the actual meat of an interaction when you are playing with another individual. That's where all the flogging and the tying up and the spanking goes. Um, After which, as a result of being brought out of homeostasis and all of those chemicals um, that are now heightened within your body, all kinds of things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, some people report feeling worthlessness after a scene.
Mm.
Um, some people feel like they're just kind of lost, like after a scene. Some people like to feel like that the dom or the top that they were playing with actually cares about them and actually values them.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to be praised after a scene. Some people like to be given feedback about what they did and didn't do that was great or not so great, like during the scene. And what aftercare does is, in my opinion, it kind of, in a sense of speaking, um, helps piece a person back. Because as we play, we kind of we as we let go, we become fragmented from different parts of us in our in
Mm-hmm.
our in our letting go,
Mm-hmm.
right? So aftercare kind of puts things kind of back together. Not that no one is like inherently broken or they're like completely destroyed as a human being or
Mm-hmm.
anything, but aftercare is basically like, hey, thank you for this time that you spent with me. Thank you for trusting me with your body. Thank you for trusting me with your soul. Thank you for trusting me with your mind. Thank you for spending some of what is the precious commodity is time with me. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I cherish you. I'm thankful you're here. I'm thankful you exist, and I'm just really appreciative of the fact that we could meet on this day together. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what aftercare really is at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And would you say if someone is not practicing that, then they are not practicing ethical BDSM?
No, I would. So not everybody needs aftercare, but not asking someone if they need aftercare is not ethical. Aftercare is a staple
Mm-hmm.
here of BDSM. I would say that I would go as far as to say that it is a pillar of BDSM as well, and a way to do doing ethical BDSM, doing BDSM ethically. Um, One of the requirements is aftercare, or at least asking if somebody like needs aftercare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It lets them know all the things that I just said, which is important when you're like giving your being over to somebody.
Absolutely. I mean, because it is such a vulnerable place. And I think, maybe that vulnerability and that exposure is one of the things that a lot of people easily think that BDSM or practicing BDSM or a scene always involves sex. How would you explain like the distinction? Because I feel like so many people automatically, oh, BDSM, oh, okay, we fucking like, and I feel like that is completely the exact opposite. What would you say to that?
I said bondage, discipline, dominant submission, and sadomasochism. I said nothing about sex.
Right.
I think that's a common. I think that's a common misunderstanding about BDSM. Yeah, it can totally involve sex if that's what you want to do in your BDSM. Um, but that's not the case. That's not the basis of like why we do what we do, or for the reason that we do what we're doing. Um, it's important to know that a BDSM relationship or your brand of BDSM can look for everyone. If you want to incorporate sex into your BDSM, do it. But I ask you, why are you doing BDSM in the first place?
Mm,
What is your purpose for being here? Because I can have sex without BDSM.
right.
I can have sex completely and totally without BDSM. You know. So what is BDSM? So I implore you to think that what is BDSM giving me that sex isn't? Why do
Mm,
I feel the why do I feel the need to conflate the two together?
mm-hmm.
I would also ask a person to just think about like think about their relationship with sex.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's important to like be able to appreciate things for what they are, separate, and then to put them together as a whole. So, what are your views on sex?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about sex? What do you see sex as?
Mm-hmm.
What do you get out of sex? Are you giving a lot during sex? Are you receiving a lot during sex? How do you feel after sex? All
Mm-hmm.
right. What if those experiences are negative? Can
Right.
we kind of look over here and kind of deal with some of those things before we kind of look over here? Like anybody who's listening who has a vulva has messed with somebody who owns a penis and it's been trash. Namely, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're a cis woman and you've been with a cis man, at some point you've had sex with one of them and it's just been absolute fucking trash.
Absolute garbage.
Maybe maybe he rubbed his clit too damn hard. Maybe he couldn't find it. Maybe he thought that taking his thumb and rubbing your nipple in a counterclockwise motion would be just the thing to get you ready and hot and bothered and ready to go. And in fact, it
It
wasn't.
wasn't.
You know, so on this side, sex is an opportunity. In regards that we see ourselves, to reclaim our bodies, to reclaim our pleasure, to put our pleasure first. It's too often that we put men first. It's too often that even pornography
Mm-hmm.
centers the male orgasm with that old fashioned money shot. It's
Mm-hmm.
gotta have a money shot. You know what I'm saying? It's not worth it if you don't have a money shot. Have you ever seen porn that didn't like result in a money shot and
Right.
it involved a man and a woman? No, you haven't. So if you're like disillusioned with sex over on this side, why would you be trying to put it in BDSM over here? If your BDSM ain't like super tight and you don't understand some of the fundamentals and principles of BDSM, why are you trying to like put it in with your sex?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think this is the opportunity for people to like work on themselves and work on centering their own pleasure and also work on changing their different narratives. But you have to look to things as separate before you make them whole.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, you will improve your overall experience.
Yes.
And I believe that people can do that. They just have to be like willing to examine themselves in various
Mm-hmm.
circumstances.
Listen, and there's so many people out there that are not willing to do that and not willing to take the time. And I mean, sex aside, like not even willing to do that on a regular Wednesday at noon. Like you need
Hmm.
to sit in the like and I'm wondering, I'm hoping that this time, of like the entire world like fucking stopping has allowed people to enter in a space that they are able to slow down and examine who they are, what they want, what they need in different areas of their lives. Because I don't think, because we are not often receiving power or are able to obtain power in that way. I think when we have that, we forget we have the power of ourselves and we have the power of our choice and our choices of life and how we present. But when we reclaim that, it's a completely different. It's revolutionary. It's a completely different experience, and I do believe that it is important to be able to asking yourself like, why is it important for you to show up in this way with this person at this time. And if you don't have those answers, then maybe you need to take a step back a moment and say, okay, now, what is it that I need? What is it that I want? What is it that I desire? What's missing? What's not missing? How, maybe I need help connecting the dots. All of those things. I think are really, really important. So thank you for that. I can talk to you for hours, but I definitely want to be conscious of the time. And I think that this would be a perfect time for us to move into our Black Jezebel segment. And this is a time in the show where we share an experience, a moment in time, and where we felt sexually empowered, liberated, in our power as individuals, as people of color presented in a world where we were able to reclaim that for ourselves. And it's usually related to the show topic. And today we are talking about power, BDSM, what that looks like. BlakSyn, would you like to share a Black Jezebel moment with the people?
So I threw a play party last year, beginning of last year, and I was there with a colleague of mine, Kevin Patterson, who is my who is my counterpart in the world of polyamory. He's also written a book about the intersection of race and polyamory. It's called Love's Not Colorblind. Definitely check that out. But we were at this play party, and I'm like standing there, and I peek over at Kevin standing there, and I walk over to Kevin. I'm like, "What's up? What's up?" He's just standing there with his arms folded, just kind of looking, and he tells me to look, and I was like, "What?" He's like, "Just look, like look," and I like looked at the sea of melanin, like all these black folks. Like this was the first time I had been at a play party and joked about being ashy at a play party. And as insignificant as that might seem, that was an experience unique to what was going on at the moment. And Kevin looks down at me, and I'll never forget this. He goes, "You did this." He was like, "You did this." He was like, "Look at what you did. Look at all these people. Look at all this melanin. Look at what you did." He said, "In Philadelphia, and soon the world over, they will never, ever, ever again be able to talk about Black BDSM without mentioning your name."
So powerful.
And I had never felt like I was so moved in that moment. In that, it's not that I took what was going on for granted. It's just that I didn't see the bigger picture. I thought like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm providing space for my people, so they can feel safe and good. Because, you know what I'm saying, black folks at a play party, somebody's going to mention BBC or somebody's going to mention somebody's chocolate queen or some shit. So, by some white person. And it was just one of those, like, profound moments that has just stuck with me. I'm trying, I'm actually trying not to fucking cry right now. But, like,
it's very powerful.
If he ever ends up listening to this, thank you, Kevin, because that was the moment where I buckled down and I went hard. I haven't stopped since.
Yes, we sending it to you, Kevin. Shout out. Thank you so much for sharing. That is very, very powerful, and I think that those moments of true affirmation really allow us to be seen and really allow us to step into our power in a ways that sometimes we don't see for ourselves. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And if I had to think of a Black Jezebel moment for myself, I would actually think about my first time experiencing bondage at Sex Down South. For those of you all who did listen to my review, BlakSyn is actually the person that that tied me up. I'm probably not using the right language, but I think we did like rope play or something I had never did before. But I was in this space where I had always been curious about BDSM, always wanting to know a little bit more about what it looks like, especially because I always do see myself as, I have always been coined the strong Black woman. I have always been required to be, to take over spaces. I have a very prominent issue with giving up my control in that way. And so I thought that being able to experience bondage in a safe, controlled environment with people that look like me, that I felt comfortable with, would be a really good experience. And so I remember being like, okay, well, just tie me up. I don't know what it looked like. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like, but I trust you, and, I trust that this experience is going to be good. And I remember doing it, you continuously checking in with me and making sure, asking me, is this too tight? Are you, is this comfortable? Are you okay? Can it, would you like it to be tighter? And just allowing myself to continuously be in my body and continuously breathing through that process. Because for someone like me that is always in need to be in control, someone like me that is always tense, always experiencing some type of, anxiety and being hypervigilant, like we talked about early on in the episode, you have to be consciously and mindful in allowing that to go. You have to be really conscious in releasing that in a way that you're saying, okay, I feel safe, I'm in control, and I can allow this. I can give up my pleasure. I can give up my power in this way, and that can be. And that aspect of it was pleasurable, and that aspect of it I feel like was relieving, because it wasn't like pleasure in the normal sense that we would think of sexual pleasure. It was pleasure in the sense of I am giving consent to feel different in my body in a way that I don't on a day-to-day basis. And because of that, that feels empowering, because although I'm restrained and although I am, roped up and tied up and can't move, something about that just feels so freeing, because I consented to this and I'm allowing myself to say, you know what, Tamara, right now you don't even need to be in control. Like this person has already checked in with you. They've asked you, like, you've consented to this process. You do feel safe, you do feel control, and it's okay. It's okay to like let go and breathe. And so I would definitely say in that moment I felt like, I have to be more conscious and mindful of being in my body in everything that I do, because oftentimes we are just in our heads. We're not thinking through what it looks like to be able to give that up and what it looks like to negotiate those power dynamics. And I think that was definitely a practice that I was like, you know what, this I could definitely see how healing BDSM could be, and I definitely look forward to trying that again. I hope you are definitely coming back to Sex Down South this year. Hopefully, I know when we talked to Tia and Marla at the beginning of this season, they said they were going to be adding some new things to the dungeon. So I'm really excited to see what they're adding. They're supposed to be adding some like electricity play and stuff. I'm trying everything. I'm ready for all of it. So I definitely appreciate you for taking the time to guide me through that process. That was really, really nice.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's been a minute, but I definitely remember that you were attentive, and I made sure that we talked, and I have a tendency to ask all of these questions, but like, I just want to keep the person's like best interest at heart. And going back, the biggest thing that I remember about that whole experience is once I got the rope on you, the biggest thing that I remember was just how bright your eyes were. Your eyes, even when you remember how dark that room was, your
Mm-hmm.
eyes were so bright. They were just so bright, and they just looked like it seemed like you had just like not trying to think of like the best way to like to put it. It just seemed like it wasn't excitement. It wasn't excitement. It was wonder. You had wonder in your
Mm.
eyes,
Mm.
and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget. It took me a minute to remember, and
Thank you.
I'll never forget. But you had wonder in your eyes, and I could tell that it was a good experience for you, and I confirmed that it was a good experience for you after we got the rope off you, and
Hmm.
hopefully we can meet again and maybe make some live content down at Sex Down South, because I'm
Yes.
looking like really forward to that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that feedback. That's really helpful. It makes me think about the space and the place that I was in at that moment, and I want to be intentional about channeling that, and channeling pleasure in all aspects of my life. So I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for joining me today on this amazing episode. I mean, it was definitely worth the wait. I mean, this was fantastic. If there is anything that you would like to leave or plug, anything that you have going on, would you like to share with people, or how they can get in contact with you if they have extra
Oh,
questions?
so yeah, I am on the gram, as the kids say. You can find me at Kinky Black Educator. I am also a photographer. I have a photo project that highlights melanated individuals, non-white individuals, and fetish boudoir kink in nature settings. You can find that at Black and Brown and Blue, also on Instagram. And then just my regular photography for my cohorts with friends and acquaintances and models that I work with. Sometimes you can find that as Sin Black, which is a reversal of the syllables in my name, which is SYNBLAK. That's my platform.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. I will definitely make sure to leave all of that in the show notes. If people are interested in the work that BlakSyn is doing, I will definitely make sure you are able to contact them and have all of your questions. You can also email me at theblackjezebel.com. If you like this episode, which I know you did, please don't forget to go to Apple Podcasts and rate and subscribe and review. Share this podcast with people that are also interested in Black sexuality, Black mental health. Rating and reviewing really helps other people find us. So please definitely don't forget to do that. It allows us to increase our listenership, increase our sponsorship, and so we really appreciate all of the feedback, all of the reviews and rating. If you have a question or if you have a Black Jezebel moment that you would like me to read on air, email me at theblackjezebel.com. I'm sorry, blackjezebel at Gmail. And don't forget to follow us on social media at the Black Jezebel. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I am your host, TemaraToday. That is TEMARA Today. And until next time, bye y'all. Yay.